Hello again and welcome to another Articulate Outburst podcast. There was a video taken down by YouTube regarding what had been saying regarding NGOs, which are non-government organisations, and I probably strayed into getting two strands misunderstood, confusing Bill Gates with another thing that no one can really mention on YouTube. Obviously all other medical discussions can be had, but there's one medical discussion that can't be had, and I think I may have inadvertently crossed the streams. My shows are not scripted. I speak and shoot from the hip. I might take a few points that I've got to get across in the streams, but ultimately it's very, very difficult to then cross-reference what you said. So I'll be using a lot of Cockney rhyming slang when actually dealing with any of this. It's the merry dance that we've got to dance as the industrial censorship process clicks in. And there's a great video this morning that I watched, Simon Webb's History Debunked channel, talking all about how you can discuss the problems with the thalidomide and other medical disasters throughout the time, but there's only one problem around at the moment that no matter what you cannot. So I'm going to stay well clear of it. I think that the imposition of what I'm going to say tells you everything I need to know, and obviously you can make your own minds up. So it would never at any time to try to undermine the WHO's word on this. It was just as I say, off the cuff comment, mixing a well-known philanthropist that used to own Microsoft with other activities that he may or may not be involved in. So this is a reshot video, and it's quite difficult because I'm not scripting it to reshoot a video, because obviously from my point of view, we're in a punk band, we seek the destruction of power, or at least the exposition of power, so we expose where we see power to be, as opposed to chucking stones at the Parliament buildings, which is just a pointless act. That's not where power sits. Those are the people that put power into place from those that pay them, be it lobbyist groups, interest groups. But the kind of whole NGO thing is an interesting concept, because I think I mentioned back in the day that the Greenpeace charity, as it was at the time, was perhaps the only outside of government control type thing. The Rainbow Warrior was their ship that they'd tie to oil rigs and obviously draw attention to pollutions and other crimes around the world that, generally speaking, the Western governments may probably have had a hand in. So the Rainbow Warrior was probably the only kind of NGO that you could really see, and that was kind of as a charity at the time. We also had Oxfam, again another massive donor-based charity, again obviously from the fact that they've shot themselves in the foot, for want of a better expression, regarding the behaviour of said charity workers when working in war zones. Quite despicable, to be quite fair. So they've got their own problems. And the Rainbow Warrior, the Greenpeace ship, was torpedoed in a French harbour by the French security services. So whether it was by design or not, those two charities, or should I say, you'd call them NGOs now, were perhaps the only two that you really knew growing up around that time. Obviously then, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, again another charitable organisation, but these things morph into other things. And then there was quite some other things that used to speak out against free speech. They'd be busy now, wouldn't they? Amnesty, of course, who used to speak out on countries that were tyrannical with their people. Well, Amnesty really ought to be looking at us. The industrial censorship complex is getting beyond a joke. But I digress. These are for other streams. Stay tuned. The wheels of power move in very, very weird ways and not always obvious to the me's and you's of this world. So getting on to NGOs. NGO is a non-government organisation that's backed by serious money, generally backed by an oligarch or some other billionaire behind it all, and that then NGO does their will. For example, if you remember when Trump was in power in America, the southern border was going to be sealed, and I think it was George Soros had had a caravan coming north with a load of people to effectively invade America. Obviously from his point of view, all his companies benefit from lower wages, benefits from the fact that the Democrats benefit from the fact of a high legal or illegal occupation because they generally vote Democrat. So from a Democratic Party point of view and a George Soros point of view, the best way you can kind of get your vote, if you like, is if you bring in loads of people that are likely to vote for you. Argument says that Diane Abbott's done the same in her constituency in London, but again, that's a flight of fancy. I've got no proof of that. It's just looking at the figures, one would surmise that that's probably happened. So NGOs now exude a hell of a lot of power. When you came to my days, 70s, 80s, there weren't that many billionaires around. Now there's loads of them. They're a class all on their own, and that class is beginning to gel together. And one would argue that the WF was probably the focal hub point for all this, backed up by the UN, backed up by the G20, the G8, the G9, the G10, and all the other, how can I put this, groups that are absolutely got none of our interests at their heart whatsoever. They're going to drive their agenda. I once remember when Davos first came up and the BBC had said, oh, it's where government leaders get together to discuss, and I'm thinking, discuss what? What would you want to be discussing with other people? Obviously, when nobody comes out with anything, yes, some of the talks are shown, but it's obviously the back channel deals that are getting done that's obviously a curse and a cause of concern for every citizen in the UK. The fly in the ointment, of course, is when we voted Brexit, and before anybody starts, I voted Remain. I didn't really know too much about it. I went for the status quo. What I wasn't prepared for is how many people quite literally lost their bloody minds over it. But you can't always back the favourite, can you? So where WEF and UN and everything else, using the European Union to exude power is a very, very simple thing, and I thought by stepping away from that gives them that extra little bit of work to do, but oh no, not quite out of Europe, are we? So NGOs such as WEF, UN, all these unaccountable people, we don't elect them, we don't say, yeah, that's a good job, we want a bit more of this. This is operating outside our democracy and it's top down. This is coming from the top down. They're well funded, they're absolutely adamant on what they're going to do. I think destruction of the nation state is a minimum. Certainly the more people that can dilute a nation state, for the more subservient we become, what you're fighting for, what you're defending. And both government, Tory and Labour, want these people here. Nothing else explains their actions. They could put in laws tomorrow that prevents any illegal ever becoming a citizen of the UK. They've got an 80-seat majority and they can do it in a heartbeat. But their pals at the NGOs are driving this. Soros, Gates, Blair, you name it. And these foundations ain't just chicken feed. This is not something working out of a back office. This is something with substantial global reach. Now, I've got to be careful with Blair and what he's doing in Africa because I think it'll trigger a warning on YouTube. But all I can suggest is if you type in Tony Blair and any country in Africa you want, Google will tell you exactly what he's up to. Except I don't think he's involved in Niger, which has recently just had a coup, or some kind of coup. So I don't think he's actually got any interest there. So this is what it's about. So when I wrote the song Cathedral is it's a Curtis Yarvin term, to be fair. I think Academic Agent's done a better version of it by being called the octopus, because I think it's top down. I think intellectuals are the paid shills of the NGOs, not the other way around. And I think everything comes down to whatever result you want from a scientist can be bought, and I think whatever evidence he needs to get his money will be put forward. There's never any counter-arguments anymore to anything. Global warming is fixed and it's going to happen no matter what, despite the evidence to show over time that the Earth's temperatures rose, declined. Yes, we're going through a period of warming at the moment, but it's nowhere near as hot as it used to be. And as for the evidence of, again, I don't want to get another YouTube strike, so always get a climate change warning under every stream. So I think it's up in the air, but there's no counter narrative. You don't get the alternative. So this is where I feel that we're being railroaded along. So when I wrote Cathedral is really about this whole thing, the organ, if you like, that's driving down through the governments, down to the people. The cathedral, it's unmovable, it's great imagery for a song. Opening lines are, some say this is a new thing, some say this is always thus, silent and unmoving, controlling all of us. And this is what's happened. Power now is globalised. We have a tendency to see it all as one lump, but there are several power centres within the power structure that are probably competing with themselves, but I think they've got more in common with each other than they have not common with each other. So if you take Blair, for example, he's got a 1 foot definitely in the technocrack business. He'd have digital IDs, he'd have digital passports, he'll have other things to prove that you've had some procedure or another that I'm not allowed to speak about, all indoctrinated onto that paper. It won't be long before they're going for your biometric data, and it won't be long before they're selling that on. And you know, you can just see that this is, out of all the dystopian novels you've ever read, made real today. So Blair's got 1 foot firmly in that camp. He's got 1 foot on the continent of Africa through his dictators. Again, I'm very careful about what I can say about that, because you can't help thinking that if you draw some attention to something like this, then ultimately you're going to get another strike, another, you've been an naughty boy. You are not allowed to conject anymore. You are only allowed to say what we believe to be true. So truth is already undercutting us. But as a punk band, you've kind of got to take these power structures and try to turn it into a song. You know, I'm in the business of entertainment. I'm also in the business of opening people's eyes. I'm also in the business of poking my finger in the eye of the establishment. I mean, that is what punk is. That's what it used to mean. And as yet society's changed, it's poking its finger in different eyes. I'm poking my finger not in the eye of the democracy or in the eye of the press. I'm poking my finger in the eye of the power structure. That power structure, since the internet's been born, is more visible than it's ever been before. So the NGOs are in a global mass, and I'm sat here working out how I can talk about them without naming any names or pointing the finger or telling you how things happen. I don't want to cross the boundaries into medical procedures that may or may not happen, may or may not be coming down the tubes in the future. But the fact that you can't talk about them or even have a different opinion to that is dictated to you is the difficulty that we find. So, thinking things through, we have effectively a cloud of NGOs that are pushing, and this is through the media, this is through government, this is through the institutions, this is through the UN, this is from the WHO, the WEF. In fact, you could probably do an alphabet song. Originally, my alphabet song were going to be about the transsexual movement, because they just keep adding a letter. But I think if we looked at, we could play wank words bingo, couldn't we, with the NGOs, if you like, Tony Blair Foundation, you know, WEF, WHO, UN. I think there's enough letters in there to play wank words bingo. Just a thought. I might come up with that in a future stream. So this was really to kind of set the scene as to why NGOs had been pulled, why we got. It was not technically a strike; it's a warning. If it happens again, I get what's called a channel strike. That's when they can start to take you down. And obviously they've deplatformed Russell Brand today, although this will go out on Thursday, so I'm a day late. And they've demonetised Russell Brand for nothing more than anonymous accusations from people that neither of us or nobody knows yet, and YouTube have taken it upon themselves to demonetise him. So people in California have completely forgotten that the rule of law means you face your accusers and you prove yourself to be innocent or guilty. Now an allegation is all that's required and you are doomed, which is absolutely awful. To think that people will never know have said things about somebody who we all do know, and he has no right of reply, no recourse. Obviously the flip side of this is he will not be able to go to court, because there's absolutely no chance of him getting a fair trial. Just about everybody in the country must know about this now, which means prosecution is impossible, but more importantly, Brand proving his innocence is also now impossible. So you've got to understand that these power centres, such as YouTube, such as, not so much Twitter anymore, that's another fly in the ointment, that's to be discussed, but Facebook, YouTube and all the others have just kind of the following a set narrative laid down by the big globules of the NGOs and the global elites. to our detriment, you know, to our detriment. If you're not allowed to say what you think, you're not allowed to say how you feel. I think it was George Orwell that said, if you want to keep a secret, you've even got to keep the secret from yourself. Absolutely fantastic quote from 1984. Yeah, you've even got to keep the secret from yourself if you want to keep a secret. Great quote, and that's where we are. That's where we are. So what you've kind of got to do is, and this is going to get worse. I know that they're picking people off one by one, which is very interesting. You look at the kind of banned list. When it's one at a time, nobody really notices it. And Nigel Farage didn't quite work out as they'd planned, but ultimately now they're on a brand, and this is what's going to happen. There's just going to be a deplatforming of people. So I'm going to have to navigate these high seas. I have to watch what I say. I have to refer to certain things in a rhyming, slang or code, and that's the problem with speech. It'll always find a way out, however much censorship you put on. Once remember the Sun ran a story about, the one I mentioned, I can't use the word in case this is bloody banned as well, but for female breasts always had a load of different nicknames, and there was a campaign in the 90s to stop them being called the name that starts with a T. And the Sun came out and said, well, it won't matter what you say, we can't call them. We'll call them Wally John Blacks if we have to. And that was a case then, but I fear that paper would now be on the side of the other. So hindsight's a beautiful thing. When you look back, you can see that these things have been tried before. Now they've been tried, and now it's working. So you can see how all this is working. So the NGOs are really the ones that are the power behind the throne. We've got the Tony Blair Foundation, we've got George Soros Foundation, I always like to call it foundation, the Bill and Melinda, I won't say the second name in case that comes up again, foundation, and you know, all these people do not wish us well. These people do not wish us well. Why would a software millionaire be buying most of the land in the USA? What's going on? What is their grand plan for us? And that's what this punk band's about. It's about poking a finger in the eye of the establishment, and obviously directing that down to people on a dance floor who are going to hopefully get involved in some pub rock and roll, because that's what this channel's all about. So thanks for listening. A bit of a rambling one. It's very difficult when you don't script your videos to talk about things freely, when you know that some algorithm somewhere, I'm definitely on somebody's list, but I'm assuring you of our best attention at all times. If you could like the video, share, and above all, if you could subscribe. Try to get me subscribers up to 100 before the end of the year. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but this channel is very niche. I don't expect millions of followers. It's punk alt-rock, which has not exactly got the biggest reach, and then political punk alt-rock has probably got even a less of a reach. But we do have some loyal fans. We've got some loyal fans, friends, family, and everybody else. But if you could like and subscribe to the channel, I'd be forever grateful, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.